Well, good evening, and welcome to another episode of Forbidden Science, or as some people call us, FSUFO. This is the show where we look at all things UFO. We look up, we look down, we look in and out, wherever we have to get up and close and personal with the phenomena and some of the latest examples of it. Tonight, we're going to do this with a very special guest that we have here, Debbie Ziegelmeyer. Now, I've met Debbie a couple of years back in 2018 in Toronto, and she's a busy girl when it comes to UFOs, and we're so pleased to have her here tonight. So, Debbie, are you going to come in and greet us here? There she is.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for finding the time to let us have you here. In what I think of as the tailpipe of North America here in Nova Scotia, where we jut out into the Atlantic and where it's just about impossible to be more than 40 miles from the ocean. So here, if you're seeing a UFO, there's probably water next by. If it isn't fresh, it's salt. And to us, these things go together because they're not far removed. Now, Debbie, I've got some cheat notes here for you. Usually I don't need this. I memorize things. I met you. And this is the short version, people, of this girl to tell you how busy
Uh-oh.
she is.
Hold
Okay?
on.
Debbie joined MUFON in 2000 and became a field investigator, something I should have done when I was in it, but I didn't. I was just so busy. She is currently a MUFON star investigator, and we're going to get her to explain that a little later. She's the Missouri State Director on the MUFON Business Board of Directors and the MUFON Functional Director of Underwater Research and Recovery. Ooh, that's interesting. I like the promise of that word. She has over 1,200, I don't know how she does this, completed UFO investigations. I'm still working on some of my first ones, with over 860 of them being I skipped a line here. MUFON sightings. Okay, so they're from their own database, and I've used that database to my advantage. We'll talk about that later too. Debbie has been a Roswell 1947 crash investigator for over 25 years, and that would be a short list of people. She's a volunteer archaeologist. I mean, is there anything you don't do? Including this stuff. Look at this, what she sent me.
Look at that.
How many people have
to mention her IMDb list?
Yeah. Okay, but we're going to go on because this is the short version. We owe her this, Justin. Okay. 2002 Roswell crash, startling new evidence. She was part of that. The 2006 I saw these ones, UFO Hunters episode, Roswell Revisited. Bill Burns was in that, I think. I know you were in it. No. Okay.
No. He was in a different UFO Hunter.
There's my, yeah, that's right. I know I've seen him in some. There you go. Memory is plastic, especially mine. Anyway, I did see you in Alaska Triangle, at least one of them quite recently up here. There's probably a leg by the time it gets up here in the Great White North. And just this year, Discovery Series, Roswell, The Final Verdict. And I don't think I have seen that yet. It probably hasn't broadcast here north of the U.S. In 2017, you were awarded both the Roswell Incident Excellence, Roswell Incident, it's too many vowels, Excellence Award by the Roswell Daily Record and MUFON Field Investigator of the Year. And how many field investigators are there? Well, we might even ask that after. Your first book, The Alien Colonization of Earth's Waterways, and that hasn't been out that long. And I just found out Jeff Bezos is sending me a copy, and I wish I'd had it here to read, but we'll get into that, what it's about. A reference guide to UFO and USOs. So, unidentified flying objects and unidentified submarine objects and water-related activity. It was just released in September and is available on Amazon, and we have a graphic of it up. Is that your first book, Debbie?
It is. Yep.
It's a lot of work, isn't it, getting one of those things out, right? You wonder how these guys like Kevin Randall that churns out 100 of them, how many, obviously these people do not sleep, right? They do investigate UFOs. But with all these other things that you're doing, um,
Uh,
you found the time to write a book. Okay. And why now? Because you've been in this, as it says, what, 20 years at this and 25 years at that. Why now? Is it just that you had that much data, or you felt compelled, or well, just
to be honest, with all the COVID lockdowns, I had a lot of extra time. Places
oh,
that I used to go, places that I'd travel. So a lot of that was limited. And so
mm-hmm,
April of last year, when they first started, April of 2020, where they first started limiting different places that were open and travel to different countries and travel even within the United States. So I decided, well, this is the best time to use this productively. And I've been gathering things for over 20 years. So I thought, well, about time I put it in a book. It was going to be a little book. And then the more I started looking into it, and more started gathering information and started researching. And then everything too that I was checking, double and triple checking my sources for different things. There was so much information that my editor, Margie Kay, she said, this is actually going to be a reference book. And I didn't know exactly what point to stop, but at one point, I mean, you just have to stop. You just have to say, "This is it." There's just I've got to stop somewhere because it's ongoing. I mean, it's really scary how ongoing things are that are being seen coming in and out of the water.
yeah, I understand. And the thing is, usually the only thing that limits you is deadlines or publishers, and then sometimes editors. I've seen manuscripts I've done, whether it's for a paper, for a book, and they thin out. They thin out over time, particularly if you got to deal with three different editors and that kind of thing. You know, I know how much material you have because I remember you had the most amazing slideshow when I saw your presentation in Toronto in 2018 at that MUFON conference. And you're all over the place too. I mean, I can remember the cases that you'd personally looked into in the Great Lakes, the ocean, inland waterways, whatever. Is there a body of water you haven't dunked yourself into, or?
Oh, I went ahead to Russia. I went ahead over there, Japan. I've not made it to Hawaii. I've investigated those different places, but so far, no. I've been snorkeling and diving in Alaska. It was great. There's so
Wow.
much. I mean, the Earth is 70% water. There's not enough for me to go around. I should have started way earlier, but maybe when I was a small child. But the more research I did, I couldn't believe how much I found. I thought, well, how far back is this? I found passages in the Bible. I
Hmm.
ancient myths that were in several different places, so they were verified that it wasn't just somebody on the internet that made something up. I mean, these things
Hmm.
are real. I verified them with books and different sources. I can't believe how long there's been an alien presence here. And what I started realizing was I changed the name of the book after I began doing the research and getting it all together, because if you stop and think about it, we are calling these beings visitors. They're far from visitors. They're here. They've been here for a long, long time. For centuries, they've been on this planet. You can just tell by the Nimitz, the video that now the
Yeah.
Navy is
Yeah.
releasing, coming in and out of the water. And then I
Hmm.
started thinking, if you think about it, okay, so I know you work in one place, and then a lot of people travel maybe to the next county um, for their job. They live in one county and they may travel to another, or there's not a lot of people that work right there where they live. So this is kind of the same thing if you think about it. They're coming to our planet, and this is their job. They're gathering data, they're doing whatever. They're gathering our resources. They're harvesting probably resources and who knows what. So this is their place of employment, I would say, or at least their place of research. And I
Hmm.
don't think they're going home every time they come over here. And I believe, according to the dictionary, if you've set up residence at least for 2 weeks, or set up a place where you're living for at least 2 weeks, you're a resident. So
Hmm.
it's kind of, you have to think of it in that way. They're not visitors. They're here. And they've probably been here as long as us or longer.
When I hear you use the term residents, what I think of, Justin, you didn't you borrow a copy of from me of Invisible Residents, Ivan Sanderson?
That's not me.
Nope.
All right.
Sorry, I
I'm
don't have
looking
that
for that book. I thought I'd get you off guard live on camera.
one.
But I
No, I'd give that back, but
yeah. But
I, it,
Invisible
it, it,
Residents,
yeah,
yeah.
it's back there somewhere.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
Don't zoom
So you
in.
so
Yeah,
Debbie, you're
no,
familiar with Sanderson's work, right?
I
He
am.
Yeah, he saw it. Although, if I remember right, it's a long time since I read the book. Is that in his case, didn't he believe that there was an earlier terrestrial race on the Earth that was living under the ocean? He called them, wasn't it Oints, OINTS, which stood for other intelligent. Uh, Justin, that's a test. He doesn't have the book,
And I don't.
Other,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
other intelligent terrestrial species. That was it, right? He thought that it was probably more likely than they were, an alien race from Zeta Reticuli or Alpha Centauri or wherever. But so it sounds like you're very comfortable, and you're saying that there's an alien presence. Are you able to discern which one that's often reported, or is that for someone else to work out, Debbie?
I think that's where the confusion is. We all know,
Hmm.
anybody who's done this type of research knows there are multiple alien races. The
Yes.
problem with that is so many of the researchers are taking the information that they gather and they're intermixing it, that you can't take several different races and try and categorize them all together. We may
Hmm.
have one race that, let's say in Russia, I found several reports of 10-foot tall alien beings underwater at depth. This came out in some Russian files. It's also, there's a couple of Russian books that talk about it, but they're at depth, 10-foot tall alien beings. They're in Lake Baikal and another lake that's in close proximity. And there was an incident that happened with some Russian, the equivalent of Navy SEALs, who had some encounters. They've also been seen surfacing a little bit. That's a 10-foot tall alien. Then you look at the Roswell aliens; they're 4-foot tall grays. There's there's another description of oh my goodness, of in the Caribbean, they describe chupacabras, which I don't even know if that's an alien or if that's just something that's maybe malformed or because of who knows. But
Mm.
well, let me give a good example of the different types of races. Let's just take Bigfoot. You got Bigfoot, you got Abominable Snowman, you've got Yeti. This is different places, the same creatures being called different things too. So we know that this is something that's worldwide. We know even the Abominable Snowman and Bigfoot, one's got white fur, one's got dark fur. So we have different races that are here and different people trying to describe them. Then you try and put everything together, and all it is it meshes into one big mess. You try
Mm.
if you look at it all, it's like a big puzzle, and you're trying to take pieces of a puzzle and fill it in little by little and find out what's going on. The problem is you may have 5 or 6 different puzzles in the same box, and you're trying to fit the pieces in, and it doesn't add up. So that's why I've decided that I'm going to focus mostly on water. And if I can figure out what is coming in and out of the water, who's seeing what, and what the descriptions are, at least I can get a handle on that, and then let somebody else take care of Bigfoot and crop circles and um, craft that are coming in and out of the mountains, because we have that going on too. I know
Mm.
it sounds confusing, doesn't it? But
Well,
it's
my take is even more confusing because I back up another step still and say that the unknown cases, whatever kind of phenomenon it is, whether it was USOs or UFOs or encounters. I say that you know, there's multiple causes for the unknowns. Like there's not a single cause, right? So it could
Right.
be even beyond aliens, with me, is my take on it, sort of thing. I got one question before I encourage Justin to. I'm surprised he hasn't jumped all over me, jumped in when you were talking about Bigfoot and that. He's much more knowledgeable about this than I am of that. But I have a question since you were on that, these Russian reports fascinate me a bit of 10-foot things in Lake Baikal. First of all, Lake Baikal is an interesting phenomenon itself, such a huge volume
It
of water. Most people have no idea how much water is sitting in that lake here. But when these things are reported, are they using technology under the ice? Like, do they have garments or something that would be an equivalent of scuba, or are they just on their own? Like, is there any details in those Russian reports, Debbie?
From what I gathered, there were divers that were at a couple hundred plus feet. They were tech divers that were training, and they came across, I believe it was 4 of these 10-foot tall aliens at depth. And at depth, I mean, you've got to have a flashlight. So they
Mm-hmm.
come across these things, must have been terrifying. They backed off. They didn't try and interact with them. Just came to the surface. Of course, it took
Mm.
them several minutes to get to the surface because of decompression. They had a meeting with the Russian officials, and it was decided that they were going to go back down and try and catch one of them. So these guys went back down again. I believe there were 6 of them. Went back down again, took a net, and decided they were going to see if they could see these beings in the same area. They go to the same area, and sure enough, they show up again. So they move forward, and they decide that they're going to take this net and throw it over one of them. And when they do, the alien puts his hand straight out, and when he does, they all shoot right to the surface. All the Russian divers go right straight to the surface,
Wow. Mm.
which
At
it caused
from a couple, yeah.
well, it happened that I think they said they had 2 decompression chambers. One was broke. A couple of the divers pretty much died immediately. They took the other 4 and tried to shove them into one decompression chamber, and it ended up one diver survived it. But after that, there was a big hearing on it, and they decided that they weren't going to be diving in that lake anymore. There's also a cave that's not too far from there where they found these bones of a 10-foot tall creature. Now, they described the creatures as, had something just in their mouth. They didn't see a tank. If you think about
Mhm.
it, if you have several 100-year technology ahead, they could have basically a rebreather, could be a little something just little in your mouth. Uh, Maybe not. I mean, maybe they live down there. Maybe they have a base down there. I don't know. They weren't able to get that close and find out. But there are
Mm.
reports. You could go into some of the Russian files that are released, and there are reports of these. They've been seen from submarine, and I believe it was over 1,000 feet deep in a submarine, and they saw one of
Hey.
these creatures.
But the key thing here is they required some kind of assistance, but how they withstood
It
that
looked like it.
pressure is amazing. Yeah.
The pressure, right? How they withstood the pressure, whether they lived down there or that they actually live at depth, or whether or not they had some kind of a base down there and that they were coming in and out of it and doing research. It's hard to tell.
Mm.
That's the problem with our oceans. We've got so many deep areas and trenches and uh, icy areas. There's so many places to hide, so many places that as humans we don't have access to. And when you
Mhm.
can come in and out of a galaxy, when you've got technology that
Yeah.
may be 1,000 years ahead of ours, it's not a big
Mm.
issue for whoever it is.
It's a good place to hide. I mean, look at the,
Absolutely.
the Malaysian airliner that went down. Look at the amount of search effort that was done by multiple nations, and how little was brought up. And most of what was found had what drifted for months and come ashore, off the east coast of Africa there. Um, I don't know,
Yeah.
Justin, where do you want
Yeah,
to
let
go
me
with
jump
this
in for a
next?
sec here. First of all, it's great to see you again, Debbie. The last time I saw you was in Toronto as well for that MUFON conference. And I was more of the camera monkey running around trying to capture all that stuff. But I did manage to get some great footage of you and Chris having some really great talks. So it's good to see you again for sure. I just want to ask you a couple questions actually. And first of all, it's really interesting you mentioned that there's these reports of 10-foot tall beings in Russia, because when I was a kid growing up, I remember seeing it must have been, I feel like it was the late 80s. I read an article in the newspaper and I actually cut it out and clipped it and saved it. I've got it somewhere here of a public UFO landing where four or five, I can't remember
Oh
what
yeah,
number of beings came out of this craft in a public park. And
yeah.
apparently they're just enormous, like 10 feet tall themselves. So there seems to be a rich history of these tall beings in Russia, if what you're saying is correct. But I sort of do want to just go back a little bit more and say that, I think your work with this USO situation and the Earth being a potential base for a lot of activity is really, really important, because you're really the only one that's really cataloging a lot of these sightings and visuals, and it's really important to the phenomenon as a whole. But the question I have for you about the whole book that you wrote, and I got to play devil's advocate here because I'm a big fan of all theories. I'm a fan of a guy named Mac Tonys who wrote a book about called The Crypto Terrestrials. You might be aware of it. A really, really great writer and forward thinker. And you used the term residents when we were talking earlier about the phenomenon. And I think that's very insightful too, right? Because what we might be dealing with is a native species to the planet. We might be some sort of, for better or for worse, a byproduct of that. And the choice of your title for the book being The Alien Colonization of Earth's Waterways, I'm just wondering why were you trying to target a demographic, or is that just the way you feel about the phenomenon? I feel like it's the latter, but I'd like to hear it from you.
Well, the more research I did, and honestly, I had so much data that I had gathered over the years. And I started doing additional research because when you gather data for 20 years, you want to make sure whatever you have is updated. So as I'm going through uh, everything that I could to try and put this book together and trying to categorize it, it actually put me back a bit. I stopped writing for about a week. I could not believe how long this planet has been visited, how far back this is documented by several different sources. You go back and there's the Bible, the St. James version of the Bible, which I have a copy of, and go back through Japanese folklore and just go back through history. And there was even sightings prior to Christopher Columbus. So I started looking into documented logs, ship logs, and I couldn't believe how much is out there, how much is being reported. So I started thinking to myself, you have so many sightings. This is just water, but you have so many sightings that are going on, and we all call it visitors. I thought they're not visitors. They're coming in and out of the water. They're coming out of the water, whoever this is, with their craft. They're doing whatever it is, whatever their agenda is for the day, and then going back into the water. And we've got a lot of reports about that. I mean, you had, one of the most famous recently is the Nimitz. And I thought they're not going in and out of the water just temporarily and then leaving and going home maybe light years. They're here. They've been here. They've pretty much just colonized our planet, whether or not they're in mountains. There's Mount Hayes in Alaska, where I've heard tale where these craft, kind of the mountain kind of, I guess it looks like it's like opens up and then goes back in. It's almost like it's manipulating, like they can manipulate rock or matter. I've heard that before. I've heard that that's what people have seen underwater. So there's so many hiding places here, the water being the best. Just in Missouri, the sightings are unbelievable here with the water. We've got a lot of water. We've got a lot of caves. So the more I research, this isn't something where you've got these beings are traveling light years, they're coming over, doing whatever, and they're leaving. No, they're here. They are staying here for however length of time it is that they're actually here while they're doing whatever it is they're doing. Like I said, whether it's gathering minerals or they're doing research or whatever. They're here living here for a while. They have taken up residence. They have colonized because these beings, the same type of beings, go back centuries. The descriptions go back centuries. So to me, that just seems like we have been colonized by, and whether or
Yeah.
not it's the same beings or it's a turnover, they're here, and our planet is, whether or not we want to admit it, I don't think we can consider them visitors anymore. They're here. They're
Well, let me
colonists or
ask you
residents.
this. Let me ask you this. What makes you think that they're alien, I guess, is what I should have asked, right? Because if they've been here for that long, maybe they didn't come from anywhere.
There might be some that were here. Well, if you go back to the pyramids, you look at some of the ancient alien, well, ancient drawings, I guess pictoglyphs, and they show some of the gods, and the gods look like aliens. Some of them are considerably taller than the people that are working for them. Some of the gods, they have elongated heads. They talk about how they come from the heavens. Even in the Bible, it talks about how they come from the heavens. How there's a
Genesis 6:4.
right.
Yeah,
Oh, there's a lot of passages,
yeah.
and how they're taken up through a light. So this has been going on for a long time now. Whether or not they were already here, maybe there's 2, 3 species that have been hiding out here, but the amount of different descriptions, the amount of different species that have been reported, the different descriptions, I can't say that all of them have been here forever. There might be 1 or 2 that have been here for a long time.
So you
And
definitely think they're from outer space.
I don't know. It's all speculation. That's the hard part about this. You can gather as much information as you want. Like my book, I gathered up everything that I could find, and then finally I had to just cut it off somewhere. I'm sure I missed a lot, but all you can do is take a look at the information that's provided by people like us, and you have to come to your own conclusions. It depends a lot where you live too. There's things that like I said have been going on for centuries, and then there's other sightings that are fairly new to an area. That could be somebody totally different. The hardest part about all of this is to try and rationalize what's happening, especially when you have so many different races of whoever it is that's coming to our
Mm.
planet. So many descriptions, so many races. You get all these descriptions. Like I said, it's too much information that everybody is trying to categorize it under one category. Basically, they're trying to say, well, the biggest argument I have with people, they say, well, I think that they can't talk, or people for research, or they're doing this or they're doing that, or they look like this, and this is their agenda. There is no one single agenda. There are so many different races
Mm.
that there are multiple agendas, multiple races, and as long as this is all being hidden, it's really hard to try and discover exactly who it is and what they're doing, because you've got mixed information.
Mm.
Does that
Yep,
make
great
sense?
point. Oh, it makes total sense. And when you take all the data that we've accumulated over the course of human history, the most logical sense is, hey, we only have records of us. There seems to be a cutoff where there's nothing before, although modern research is suggesting otherwise, that we go back even further and further. So Occam's razor would suggest that, yeah, these things are coming from somewhere else. But I think it's really important that we don't put all our eggs into one basket, because we still know very little. The problem with the doctrine of science these days, I think, is that, there is no gray area for some of these people. Slowly and surely it's changing so that it's more static. Like Stanton Friedman loved to use the term gray basket, and I think that's a fantastic thing to always keep open, right? Because we're learning new
Yep.
things every single day. And I was just curious to see where you're coming from. I mean, it makes sense to me.
Mm.
And I don't want to take away from the bigger story here, which is the important research you're doing here, Debbie. So thanks for answering that. It means a lot to hear it, because that's a big thing on my mind these days. Is I think that the water has been tainted a lot by people who sort of jump to the conclusion that it's this way, and deal with it, or leave, and it seems like a cult to me when I hear the word alien sometimes, because it's been painted so bad in the scientific world. And that's sort of why the threat theme is working these days, because people are saying, what? Oh yeah, well, we never really looked at it that way, let's take this a little bit more seriously. So I don't know, I think it's important to have a healthy skepticism about what these things really are, because even though they may tell you where they're from, I've heard stories where people were taken by beings and they laughed at these abductees when they were asked, where in space they were from, right? So if they're not going to tell us why they're taking us, why would we believe what they were telling us as well, right?
Their purposes are their own. I think
Uh
it's a
huh.
mistake to ascribe human motivation to it. And the other thing I find, humans are really terrible at are we're unable to look at ourselves. I've had many skeptics argue, saying, listen, why would they come back and abduct somebody again and again and again? To what purpose? But we still go to the ocean and take dolphins for study. We do it again and again, and many types of wildlife. And you could draw an analogy. You could look at these ocean mammals that look up and see a boat as an unidentified floating object, and sometimes they are taken, and sometimes they were returned, and sometimes they are not. Why do we keep doing it? Well, to learn more. We tell ourselves it's research, it's insight, and that. And others, whether they're extraterrestrial or something else here that we're unaware of, their purposes are their own. And we try to anthropomorphize anything, and we're not very good at it in that. So, looking at our time here, let's move on to something else. You put such an
Oh,
effort to
just
Roswell.
one,
Oh,
one,
okay,
one
go
real
ahead.
quick, real quick comment with that. Our biggest mistake and what's holding us back, all we can do is try and provide as much information as we find and let everybody make their own decision on, what they believe, what they don't. But our
Yeah.
biggest problem as humans is we're trying to give these beings, we're thinking giving them a human emotion, human reasoning. They don't
Hmm.
reason anything like us. So
Hmm.
you're when they say, okay, well, I think this alien is here for this or this or this. We're putting human emotions and human reasoning on beings that may have a totally different agenda, and we're not ever going to figure it out. As long as you have to stop thinking like humans when you refer to aliens, you have to try and think more like an alien. Does that make sense? That you can't use our
Absolutely.
reasoning
Yeah.
to figure out what they're doing because we don't reason the same, or we have
Absolutely.
emotions.
Yeah, I mean, for
So,
all we know, the church is right. These are angels and demons, and those, sorry, I hate to use the term wackos, but those folks in Washington that kept this scientific data from pouring out, because like the Collins Elite or whatever that Nick Redfern refers to, you know,
mhm.
holding that information back because of religious fundamental beliefs. What if they're right? Right. And us talking about it is ushering these doors opening to these demons. We just don't know for sure. What I do know for sure is closing the doors of scientific data because of a belief system like that really slows down the progress of the field. And I think that what's happened in the last few years in the field has really ushered in a new era of scientific thought that helps open up that gray basket. And your data is going to be super important moving forward, right? Because this is something that's really new to a lot of people, these USO accounts, especially with the Tic Tac encounter, the Nimitz or whatever, right? Like this
Mm,
is a big deal. So I thank you for your research, first of all and foremost.
Oh, thank you.
mm. I don't know how you sustain it, take the energy. I look how hard I've worked over 25 years on one case, and how I'm still making breakthroughs, and Shag is the gift that keeps giving. I mean, just recently, the last year, we solved a mystery in terms of the documents as to why 36 hours later they were sure this was a round object, and we found the one eyewitness still alive who actually saw the thing enter the water. They didn't lose sight of it behind the tree line, and they saw the water wash up in the lights, and that it was, in essence, what they used to call a flying saucer. You know what I mean? And we know how that information, being the manned lightkeeper's wife, how it got through to defense headquarters, etc., the whole chain. And if I had to look at 1,200 cases, I certainly wouldn't have any energy left over for Shag Harbor. I probably looked at the 12 other cases in depth, and it was overwhelming. And there's times you had to burn out and just give yourself the break. But before our interview's over with you, because it's such a part of the field, and I'm going to tell you something that probably nobody else can tell you right now about your work. When I first saw you in Toronto, I'd heard your name and I'd read some blurbs about you at other presentations and a paper or so. But so I asked Stanton Friedman, I said, what's Debbie Ziegelmeyer about anyway? And he said, well, she's another researcher. I said, well, I know she works on Roswell. She's another researcher. And the reason I'm telling you this is from Stanton. That's a compliment. Okay? Because I could name, and they won't be named here, a bunch of other people, and he had some very detailed critiques and colorful things about their work. But I didn't hear anything negative. He said, no, she's another researcher and she's going into it. Now, I don't know. I see you laughing, but I did that and I said, that's it? And he goes, oh, yeah, yep. And
Can I
I
tell you
was
the
like,
quick story of
okay,
how we met? How my brother Chuck and I met
by all
Stanton.
means.
We years back in 2000, 2001, sometime over there in Roswell, we decided we wanted to meet Stanton Friedman. So what we did was he used to say, I'll sign anything. He'd be signing his books. So the following year when we went, I made one of those the ball and paddle. I put his picture on it, made one for Chuck, one for me, and one for Stan. And I said, Mr. Friedman, can you sign my ball and paddle toy? And he goes, where did you get that? We had it sitting there, and people came by and they said, oh, are you selling them? The next year we had a Stanton Friedman frisbee. We had a little Stanton Friedman. The following year, a little cell phone. Uh, we would make up toys and put his picture on them and have him
Oh,
autograph them
Oh,
for
my
us.
God.
he signed off on that.
we always gave him a copy, but that's how
Ah,
we got to be friends with him. We
I love
we
it.
were pulling practical jokes on him.
Oh man, that's
Mm.
great. I'm glad you brought up the UFO nut too, because like I may not look like it because I got a bit of other than the gray hair, I got a bit of a Michael J. Fox syndrome going on. But I've been around for a while, and I actually was aware of your brother long before I was aware of you. Like, can I ask you your origin story? Like, how did you get involved in the field? I think there's a lot of viewers and listeners that'd be interested to hear your story. Right? You're such an eclectic person. It'd be interesting to hear where you're coming from.
How I got started. I grew
Yeah.
up in Safford, Arizona, at the foot of Mount Graham. I went all through grade school, all the way till high school, and then I moved briefly to California and then to Missouri. So the sky was just incredible. I mean, that's why the Catholic Church has Lucifer, the telescope there. Sky's incredible. I always had a telescope of some type. I'd sneak out of the house in the middle of the night and crawl up on our little garage on the roof and lay there and just watch
Mm.
the stars. I grew up in the area, of course, in the era of Star Trek and Lost in Space and
Mm.
um, all and then also would of course watch all the old black and white, the day the Earth stood still, and
Oh, my favorite.
so fast, extremely. I was a trekker, and I went to a conference. I went. I've seen and met everybody from Star Trek. I'm so proud of Shatner for going up in space. The first thing
Yeah,
I
that's
did was get online and buy a T-shirt and a patch and a replica of the ship. But I went to a MUFON conference in 2000, and I got to meet Bud Hopkins, Bruce Maccabee, Stanton Friedman. I think John Schuessler was there. It was the my gosh. Now when I think back on it, the first conference I ever went to just had the people. I mean, everybody, the founding fathers of the movement,
Mhm.
to find out what it is that's out there, to find out the truth. I was so impressed. I immediately became a field investigator. Immediately joined MUFON and became a field investigator. So I think I always had the interest. It was more the sci-fi type, but I wasn't one of those that always bought all the books. And so I don't know. Does that kind of explain it?
No, yeah, for sure. Chris knows I
Well,
ask this of everybody because like we all have some sort
yeah.
of
Oh,
origin
yeah, yeah,
story.
yeah. That's his
But
thing.
yeah, every time I meet a guest, whether it's now or back in my days of podcasting, is like, was there a catalyst in your life, some paranormal event that maybe pushed you in that direction? But it sounds like in your case, it's just pure interest.
Well, that came later. Once I became an investigator, I have probably
Interesting.
personally had half a dozen at least sightings. There's a picture of something in my book that I saw on a cruise. I've had several sightings, and here in Missouri, I someday we'll have to do a show just on Missouri because you cannot believe
We
what
will. We will.
Margie K and I've been through. We've it's incredible. I've lost time. The more you investigate, the more that you
Yeah.
experience. A lot of times, that
Isn't
as
that
an
interesting?
investigator, what I do, you do as many cases as I have, and and also too, at 1200, some of them were Venus, Mars, International Space
Sure.
Station. You still
Sure.
have to investigate them. But I've also
Yeah.
come across cases to where they're reoccurring. I'm working on a case in Missouri now that I've been working on since November of 2018, and it's
Hmm.
still ongoing, and we still don't know what the heck is going on in the area. Then we got Marley Woods. I worked with Ted Phillips too. You can't do this to the depth, that I take it and not eventually have some kind of a sighting or document something.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Chris and I talk about this at length,
Oh
actually.
yeah. Yeah.
Like
And we've
that
had the
Freudian
experience.
saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
We've
Freudian
had the.
saying, looking into the abyss, eventually the abyss will start looking back. In your case,
Mhm.
do you think it's more of a proximity to people or events that's taken place? Because I've talked to Chris at length about perhaps the fact that we're involving ourselves consciously in this world is somehow stirring the pot.
Hmm.
I think in Roswell, my brother and I did. We had a couple interesting things that happened to us there, and I talked to somebody who does remote viewing, and and she says, "I think you brought that on yourself," you know.
There you go.
So
Mm.
that's a long story. I mean, we had a light that flashed at us. My brother and I did. I think it was
Mm.
2016. He was out just showing me his LED lights in the front of his truck and with a remote control, and he flashed the lights, and we had something that was flashing back at us,
Hmm.
and
Mm.
it was stationary in the sky. So
Wow.
we went back the following year to try and do it again, and it's a long story, but we ended up losing an hour and a half of time. So
Chris, I feel like we
Well,
need to do like a long form 3 hour Joe Rogan podcast with
well,
Debbie.
well. We might do a special. Well, we're certainly going to bring you back sometime to talk about Missouri, right? But
oh yeah.
you know something. I don't know if you remember this, Justin, but when we first met Debbie in Toronto, there, when we finally parted there from the whatever hotel it was, they were at the airport there. I remember I looked at Justin and I said, you know what? I said, I think she was the type of girl growing up that didn't do what her mother told her.
Yeah.
And
That's
when I hear you talk about sneaking out of the house, to get a look at the night sky, right?
Yeah, I
No,
was
no,
not my
I'm
mother's.
not. Yeah,
No, I was
yeah.
not my mother's favorite child.
I
Yeah,
had a
those are the
sense of
people that
that.
get things done. I love that.
That's right. I mean, there's two types of people. There's those people that do what their mother told them, and there are those that just never did. And they went off and they were the rugged individualists. They were the ones that went out. Now, that doesn't mean hanging around the bowling alley. That could be, in your case, you have what, a 10-inch Schmidt reflector?
Yeah,
Um,
I do now.
Nice.
I don't know what you had. You might have had a refracting Tasco when you were young, but you the pattern was set. You know what you wanted to do, even if you had to sneak out to do it.
Mhm.
And we're all.
Honestly, I don't think it was all stars I was looking at. I'd look out into the sky, and that might have been watching Star Trek and watching Lost in Space, mostly Star Trek, just knowing to boldly go. And I just always had a dream. I wanted to be an astronaut. At the time, I might have been able to. They weren't accepting women. God bless Sally Ride, the first
Mhm.
Yeah.
woman, American. But I always wanted to be an astronaut. Couldn't be an astronaut, so instead I became a scuba instructor. So I've got that
Well,
same weightless
you're,
Inner
feeling
you're
space.
underwater.
also an astronaut doing this. I mean, let's be
Mm,
honest.
mm.
Chris,
Hey, I want to try what Shatner did. I'm hoping I'm going to live long enough that it's affordable.
it's coming. Chris, we should
Well,
probably talk about before we let her go. I mean, we've got to ask the big question here. Debbie's a certified diver. When do we get Debbie Ziegelmeyer down to Shag Harbor? Because I know Chris has got some leads on some things. We could definitely
well,
use a
we're
diver down at some
well.
point.
I don't know about getting in the water in October, but I can tell you when we're going to get her to Shag Harbor, and that's on day two. If what's the date? I guess it would be October the 3rd next year. 2022, because Debbie is going to be one of the presenters at the conference we're going to have, the Shag Harbor UFO Expo. We're having that in Yarmouth on the first day because we need a real hotel. We need to keep people comfortable. We need to have a stage and a little fishing village. We just don't have what we need to pull that off. But we got a lot of other great presenters coming there: Nick Pope and Ryan Sprague and Rob Switek. Who'd I miss? Oh,
Am I doing
Dave
it? I'm not
Marlar,
doing it.
David Marlar. You are you going
Oh,
to be
I
there?
Am
love
I
Yeah,
doing it? I
I'm
don't
going
know.
to
I
be
don't
there.
know. You will for
But
sure.
listen, I think I mentioned this. I'm not sure in the email, Debbie, but Shag Harbor has already honored you in a way because even though you haven't been there yet, because in the little we call it a museum, it's probably more properly called an interpretive center. I convinced them that they needed a section for the women in ufology, and we need more women in ufology. But we need to highlight the work of those past, present, and future, And so we took a little alcove and we put up some articles and some photos, and yours is amongst them there.
Can you
And
Oh,
guys see that? Look at this. Look, there's Debbie there. Look on the.
yeah, and in this
oh
last
wow.
summer,
Ah,
They,
people that have come in, the repeat people that come in, it's brought up more response than anything. The fact that because many people don't realize unless you're hardcore in the field that there are women and that their contributions have been significant. In fact, here right now within this episode, I'm going to tell you this woman, Coral Lorenzen, was perhaps the biggest. I can't tell left from right on these
there
things.
you go.
The
there you go.
biggest um, influence on me in terms of the style of investigation and getting out of the armchair and just going for it. She was a woman ahead of her time. The
Mm,
personal sighting that ignited the passion in her happened before the so called modern UFO era. And I think it was what, 1934? It was before Roswell. Yes, 13 years before, do the math as they say. And
yeah.
she was 9, and it never left her and her friends. And, she eventually, of course, formed uh, the
APRO was it?
APRO group, yes. And in fact, MUFON is a descendant of it, an early splinter, with Walt Andrus. And, um, what can you say? Women have left their mark. I mean, even people that you first don't think of as researchers, but even like Betty Hill, she did books. You know what I mean? I look, I remember the impact Betty had on me when I first met her. And I was so lucky. I know the excitement you speak of, Debbie, when you go to that first MUFON conference. Walt invited me down the first time in '96, and I walked in. And because I'd done that little bit of television and that, people were coming up to me and introducing was like Bud Hawkins, and I knew that they took the time. And yeah, but I mean, she had. I had no idea how much work she had done, and as you get to know of the other women and their legacy, it's just something we need more in the field, and we need to acknowledge all that early work. And I think women is, hopefully the future in the field. Really.
You know what? I hope that someday we can have a section in Shag Harbor that says aliens in the field. Because then we
There you
could
go.
just cover all grounds, right?
There you go. Thank you so much. I'm so honored. Thank you. That's
Yeah.
wow.
Well.
Thank you. I'm honored. I mean, I just think of myself as just another work kind of a workhorse out there, just trying to get the information out. And I, I never really realized that anybody even knew who I was. I mean, I just go out there and just try the best I can to gather information, get it out to the public, do what I
Hmm.
could do, what I can do the research, and maybe I'm a little bit obsessed at some point, but I'm
Hmm.
very honored. Wow, thank you. That's great. I don't usually
Yeah.
think of myself as a woman in anything. I just think of myself as somebody who needs to go out and get something done, and I think it
Yeah,
comes from being a business owner my whole life too.
good for
That
you.
Well,
Amazing.
there's a need, and get out there. If you got the time, you got the will, you got the knowledge and the opportunity, go for it. And that's what I've
you're
always told my children too.
yeah, but you're right. The work and the contributions of women is significant, and the thing that really that shows the worth of it is the fact that sometimes their work, people are shocked to find it was done by a woman. The book that I held up here by Coral Lorenzen called, I love the early lurid title, Flying Saucers, the Startling Evidence of the Invasion from Outer Space. That book was a gift to me from one of the pilots of the Pan Am flight that was in a near collision the night before Shag Harbor over the Gulf of Maine.
Oh,
And when
wow.
he gave me the book, he said, I read it. He goes, that's a hell of a book. Like, can you suggest any other books? And I realized when talking to Ralph Lowinger, the co pilot of the flight that night, is that, he said, do you know anything else by that guy, Coral Lorenzen? I said, it's not a guy, it's a woman. And it never dawned on him that a woman, even though he'd read the book cover to cover and thoroughly enjoyed it, the name, her first name there, it just didn't register with him. When I told him that, he was all the more amazed. And I said, well, why not? Women, they go in space, they do anything a man can do. In many countries, they serve in the armed forces, and they do now in the U.S. now that I think about it too.
Well,
Women are people, and they're around, and they're the majority of the population, and their contributions are essential and
And
finally being
especially in small
recognized.
towns. Yeah, and in Shag
Yeah,
Harbor too, you still have these small villages that access to this stuff is still
sure.
considerably in the past, right? And unfortunately, we're not quite there yet because women and a lot of other groups are still, for whatever reason, we're still sort of living in that mindset. But things are changing and things are looking bright.
yeah. Well, my daughter's a paramedic firefighter in the
Excellent.
St. Louis area.
Well, there
So
you go. Yeah.
I, I couldn't do it. That's terrifying.
But Debbie's right, and look, it's so great of you to point out, you go, I don't even think that I'm a woman. Well, it's your work. It's the quality of the work that we're talking about you and why you're here. It's not your gender. It's your
oh, thank
accomplishment.
you.
It's your
Oh,
effort. It's your passion, right? And when you talk about obsessed, I was obsessed. Obsession led to a couple of burnouts with me along the way, and I still survive in this field because you know what happens eventually. I found some solace in the fact that you embrace the uncertainty, but you still keep moving forward. You still gather that data. You still try to make sense. It's all we can do. But at some point, but in the back, there's still that hot coal burn and that obsession. And obviously, with you, um, it's
you
paramount.
know,
Yeah.
you only limit yourself. I was terrified of the water. I almost drowned twice when I was a child, but
Hmm.
I decided my husband bought me all the dive equipment. He got me classes. The first thing I did was my first open water dive. I passed out at 22 feet because I hyperventilated. I was
Mm.
terrified, but I thought I don't like being afraid of anything. And so the next weekend I went and did it, went and tried again. And I passed all the tests, but my husband and son said, we're not diving with you. You scare us. Well, I showed them. I went on to be an instructor. I just kept going until I was an instructor. I'm very comfortable in the water, and I'm the instructor on my son and my husband's advanced paddy cards. So
Wow.
don't tell me there's something I can't
Wow.
do because
Hey,
my
listen,
my
are you
daughter's the
offering a
same way.
seminar on power? Because I'll sign up.
Am I what?
Are you offering a seminar on power? This is great.
Power?
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know.
determination. Well, I need a bit of
Sometimes
that
I
too.
wonder. I don't know if it's power or stupidity or just being naive or what, but I just
Well, yeah, what I've said to people that say, "Well, how do you do this?" or "Why did you keep up until you got the answer?" And I usually just say, "I'm too dumb to quit. Too dumb to
that's
quit."
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just that there
I
is
can't
no
get out of it.
reason.
Chris just keeps pulling me back. I don't even want to be here. Sorry, no offense, Debbie. I love you. I'm in this
But
UFO
I
thing again. How did I get back over here?
Mm.
yeah, I mean, like I said, you put limits on yourself. The
Anyway,
only
at this
person
point,
that limits you is you.
Yeah, I'd like to suggest to people that have watched this episode after the point of release that the best two ways, if you want to know more about Debbie's work, probably would be to buy the book. And yes, that is a shameless plug, but I know it's going to be good. I can't wait till mine gets in hand, my copy that I've ordered. And the other thing is, if you want to meet Debbie, if you want to really get up close and personal, learn all about her and the contributions and what really makes her tick, probably the best way to do, if you're here in our audience, or is to come here to Nova Scotia, to Yarmouth, look at the website, shagharborUFOexpo.com. And there'll be updates there all the time as to what's going on, because it's going to be a unique conference. You could meet Debbie, you can meet the real eyewitnesses, and on day 2, we're going to take you to the actual sites where these things all happen. Not many of these things can do it. So, yeah, so we'll take you there, and we'll try to hold you back from diving into the water. It's a little chilly in October. Um, Although some people do it with a
Wow.
wetsuit, they don't have a dry suit or whatever. Look, thank you so much for making the time for us. Sometime down the road, if you want to do that, I'd love to hear about this wave in Missouri. And maybe we'll tell you about how we've had the Nimitz style sightings here. Actually, no, we had the Teddy Roosevelt style sightings here, the square and the sphere,
Right.
but the reverse configuration. We've even got video on that from Nova Scotia. Again,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Oh,
Hey,
thank
it's
you
an
for
honor,
having me.
Debbie.
I appreciate it. Oh, no, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm honored. Thank you.
Oh, you should. It's our honor to have you.